I'm Dr. Cheryl Wissick. I was at the University of South Carolina, and I'm now with the South Carolina Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Collaborative. So basically, I just want to, give a shout out to the collaborative because we want to we're here to provide information, education, and training to any communities, health, human services we want to reduce prenatal alcohol exposure. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So at the end of this presentation, you should have their 4 objectives. You want to be able to list 2 facts about alcohol and the effects of alcohol consumed during pregnancy. You want to discuss 2 misconceptions associated with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. You also want to describe the characteristics of individuals with probable exposure, and then identify at least 2 resources that can help you for support or early intervention. So alcohol, why not? Well, alcohol is legal, so it's not like it's not like you're doing anything illegal. It's also very socially acceptable. And many doctors say it's okay to drink wine late in pregnancy. 1 glass of wine can't hurt. Alcohol can help relieve stress. Everyone in the social circle drinks wine. And there are lots of women who drank alcohol and their babies are fine. Now, I listened to a little video that's on the CDC website yesterday about Melissa, and she said she drank alcohol before she found out she was pregnant, and then she went to her doctor, and her doctor said, oh, it's okay to drink alcohol. And then when her baby was born, he was fine. He, had 2 ears, 2 eyes, and legs and arms, and was perfectly healthy. When he got a little bit older, had lots of problems. When he went to his preschool, he was throwing chairs, and he was really sensitive to his clothing. And so she finally went and had a diagnosis and found out that it was the prenatal alcohol that had caused that. But why does alcohol cause problems? Well, it's called a teratogen, and it easily crosses the placenta. So once the placenta is formed, it can cross the placenta, and then it causes neurobehavioral effects. The fetal liver cannot process alcohol. And we know plenty of adults whose liver can't process alcohol, and that's why we have people with liver disease. Also, that amniotic sac retains alcohol for a longer time. So even though the alcohol might be out of your body, it's not out of the baby's. Overall, it kills brain cells, and it interferes with the cell differentiation and how the brain is formed in the DNA synthesis. So it doesn't really change anybody's DNA, but what it can do is there are certain markers on the DNA, and it can bring some to the top and ones that might not be as favorable, such as maybe predisposure to diabetes. I have a son right now who's 29 years old, and he's already using insulin, and his levels are so erratic that he can't even get a pump because he's, his levels are just up and down, and he cannot keep his glucose levels okay. So what is a standard drink? Well, we can have 12 ounces of beer, 4 ounces of wine, 1.5 ounces of liquor, or a wine spritzer. And that's considered, what is a standard drink. So what's moderation? Well, the CDC says that you can have 1 drink or less a day for women, because women have different ways that we metabolize alcohol than men. So men can drink 2 in a day or less. Now, binge drinking is considered 4 or more in a period. CDC says 4 or more in a 2-hour period. Now, 4% women admit to binge drinking while pregnant. So you say, well, I'm not going to drink, and then you go to a party. I admit I've been to parties, and everybody's socially drinking wine, and I've probably had 4 in a couple hours because you don't, you're walking around talking to people, not realizing what you're doing. And my computer's just getting a little slow here. Okay, go to the next one. There we go. Well, alcohol also interrupts fertility because you can drink lightly and it can reduce, even that's 1 to 5 drinks a week, which is still within the limit. It can reduce a woman's chance of conceiving. Long-term drinking can cause women to have irregular periods. It can cause them to stop. You can go into early menopause. Heavy drinkers who do become pregnant are more likely to have a miscarriage. In fact, I know someone right now who's a very heavy drinker, although she says she's not, and she has probably had 2 miscarriages, in the last year. But heavy drinking and binge drinking can also lead to, vomiting and the effectiveness of birth control. So, it does affect fertility. So if you're going to think about getting pregnant, just stop drinking altogether. Now, I'm not sure this is not going to run, but here's the link for alcoholthinkagain.org, and they have like a 30-second blip that whenever you drink, so does your baby. So to you, it's just 1 drink, but you think about what 1 drink is going to do to a baby. Alcoholic use disorder can have a child with fetal alcohol, and that's not true. I realized my videos would decided not to run. And I am going to develop I have a 1-page handout that needs to come along with this that you can then use and have all these links. There we go. Well, drinking at the time of conception. Now, what if you consumed alcohol before you knew you were pregnant? But there is a theory that before that first missed period, so it's 0 to 18 days of conception, there's this natural protection from any teratogenic agent because that zygote's self-contained and any alcohol in the bloodstream doesn't impact it. But the main rule is if you're trying to get pregnant, stop drinking. If you're drinking, use protection. Now, drinking during the first 3 months really increases the risk of miscarriage, premature birth, and having a baby a low birth weight. This is actually a picture of my granddaughter when she was born, and she was teeny, teeny, tiny. She was less than 5 pounds. Her mother drank early in her pregnancy, and she smoked cigarettes her whole pregnancy, which is another risk for premature birth and having a low birth weight is cigarette smoking. Now, many women drink and then they have unintended pregnancies. This is from Canada, and there's an organization on the Center for Excellence for Women's Health, and their research shows that 1/2 of all pregnancies are unintended. In fact, let's see, I have 4 grandchildren, and probably of the 4, I think 1 was intended. I have 2 sons who were adopted in Russia when they were 2 and 3, and they were healthy, but I'm sure that they suffered effects of prenatal alcohol, which is why they were taken out of their home. So, of their children, we have custody of 1, and of the older son, he has 3. He and his wife are divorced. They have 3 children. I would say their middle child was planned. So that's more than 50% of unplanned pregnancies. Now, the other thing is that women in the age of 15 to 19 are at higher risk of binge drinking. And that's also where we get unintended pregnancies. 62% of women who report drinking alcohol in the 3 months prior to pregnancy. And then 11% of women report binge drinking before knowing you're pregnant. And there's a woman, it was a video from either New Zealand or Australia, and the woman was talking about how she just didn't know what was wrong with her son, but she had gone to a frat party, and there was binge drinking, and and later on she just she felt really bad, but her son finally, with the diagnosis, found out that he had been affected by that one time of binge drinking. Oh, I apologize for the way the slide looks, because obviously when I had to switch computers, it really did something to my heading there. And so in very tiny print, it says, why women do not talk about drinking. Maybe that's better that way, because we're whispering. No, there's also that stigma of birth mothers. So you have lots of, celebrities going out and saying, oh, I have a child with autism, and there's a big autism awareness. You don't have a lot of mothers running out and saying, I drank during pregnancy, and so let's start a big campaign for fetal alcohol. There's a fear of having your child removed at birth. There's really a lack of services and support. Many women don't understand the consequences to the baby. I mean, there's still many people who do not understand the consequences of drinking alcohol during pregnancy. And also part of that is because there's inconsistent messages from both the media and physicians, because there's still physicians out there that say it's okay to drink. And, girls want to have fun, and they have no support from their partner or friends. So you really need your friends and your partner to help support that non-drinking. Oh, again, I apologize. So what's a pregnant woman to do? Hopefully with this, if you see this video and you do it and you sign on that you completed it, you can get a PDF of this presentation with the font correctly. What's a pregnant woman to do? Well, basically you stop drinking as soon as possible. You can take folic acid, take choline. Choline is important for brain health, and it's showed that it's made some major improvements. So I would recommend all pregnant women to take choline anyway. Just remember that there's no safe amount of alcohol, and know that if someone who did drink when you're pregnant, you might not see any effects until school. Also, it's very important to get a peer support to help stop drinking, and talk to your doctor about the baby being exposed to prenatal alcohol. And I want to say there's some really good news in South Carolina, because there's a group that's working on a plan of self-care and for women who, with alcohol, who have to take drugs for certain reasons, and so there would be this plan of safe care that we can develop, that we can, really help all pregnant women. Whew. Above all, don't stress. The one thing is, if you are drinking, just don't stress about it. Try to really cut down on your drinking, but don't stress, because it really increases the stress hormone called cortisol, and cortisol can actually cause miscarriage. You can also get really educated. There's the National Organization for Fetal Alcohol Spectrum is the Circle of, and they have a group called the Circle of Hope. It's a mentoring network for birth mothers. And one of the main women who runs this organization actually spearheaded this, because she was a woman who drank during her pregnancy. Again, seek peer support and talk to your doctor about these possibilities of, I won't even say them, because I've read some articles from the CDC that recommend possibly that if you are a heavy drinker, that taking these will help reduce the effects and reduce your urge to drink. So what are some alternatives to drinking? Well, you can drink mocktails. There's plenty of recipes out there. But also, there's these non-alcoholic alternatives, which are so exciting. I've actually been trying many of these, and I'll tell you, Monday, if you're a gin and tonic person, Monday gin is non-alcoholic, and it's very tasty. There's many non-alcoholic beers, and there's non-alcoholic wine and champagne. So you can still toast the occasion, so there's lots of things on there. There's even a Facebook group to talk about non-alcohol alternatives. So I think there's a lot of support coming for this. So what are the drinking habits? Well, drinking has increased in women 21, 24. Now, drinking by pregnant women has decreased, but still 11 to 12% of women drink alcohol while they're pregnant. So that's still big numbers. Again, the excessive use of alcohol damages brain cells. Alcohol itself is the leading cause of preventable death, and that's for adults. Look at how many adolescents ages 12 to 17 already have an alcohol use disorder. And again, the biggest predictor of women drinking while pregnant is drinking before pregnancy. So if you're even thinking about pregnancy, slow down your drinking. Start getting into some alternatives. If you're already pregnant and you're really thinking, oh my God, I really need something to relieve stress, check out some alternatives for that. So let's review some statistics. Again, there was one report, it was 1 in 13 women drink while pregnant. Now, I also see reports that says 1 in 9. But let's look at what that means. CDC also reports 3 in 4 women who want to get pregnant don't stop drinking. So again, if you're thinking about getting pregnant, go ahead and stop drinking, reduce it now. But also, your partner needs to consider stopping drinking, because there's research that shows that men need to give up drinking 6 months before conception because there's a higher risk of chronic heart disease to the fetus. And men also really support your partners by not drinking or smoking. Don't think, oh, well, you're the one who's pregnant, I can do what I want. No, you need to support your mate, as they say in Australia. And again, the effects of prenatal alcohol are not just in the United States, but there's huge organizations in Australia and England and in other countries that talk about, the effects of prenatal alcohol. So if we look at 2018 and how many births there were, and if 11% were exposed to alcohol, that's possibly 6,233 infants that could be affected by prenatal alcohol exposure. Now you think, well, that's not so bad. Now let's get into the nitty gritty here. When my computer wants to slow down. You just wanted to look at that slide for a little bit longer. Okay, so what are the effects on the fetus? Well, it causes brain damage. It's typically those who have been exposed to prenatal alcohol, their brains are smaller. It is the leading cause of intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities. It can lead to cognitive, developmental, behavioral, physical, neurological problems. And then all of those end up causing secondary mental health issues, anxiety and depression. Now, there's also some new research that said it could actually be the brain damage that then causes anxiety and depression. It's not a secondary, it's actually a primary. Now, this is a very interesting YouTube video. Again, I am not going to flip out to show it, but it is showing a baby in the womb, and babies in the first 18 weeks have a startle reflex, but babies exposed to prenatal alcohol continue having that startle reflex throughout their pregnancy, throughout the term. And that shows that there is this effect that they never outgrow that little startle reflex. So that's neurological damage. One, two, three, and four, and five. Oh. This is for you to take a coffee break. I'm going to do just put my glasses on here, and I'm going to go here. I am going to easily let me do this. So we'll just go back to, well, I'll go back. It depends on these things. It depends on the ability to metabolize alcohol, on the genetics, on your liver. It depends on the pattern and the timing of when. Also your genetics, the infant's genetics, overall general health and nutrition, which is why I said take that choline, take the folic acid. Also the level of stress and trauma. So women who are in maybe an abusive relationship have obviously much more stress and trauma. The age of the mother. So older women are more likely to have a child with, suffer the effects of prenatal alcohol. Also, the use of tobacco just multiplies the risk because you're taking two agents and putting them together. And so you've got two things that are working against the fetus. Okay, I apologize. Let's see. Drinking quantity and frequency. Well, heavy drinking is associated with brain alterations, cognitive deficits, and behavioral problems. Now, binge drinking leads to the worst outcomes. Again, moderate levels, well, there's some mixed studies, but again, why take the risk? If there are mixed studies that maybe it's okay, maybe it's not okay, why just not take the risk? Because you don't know. And light and sporadic drinking, even 1 to 4 drinks a month, can cause significant psychological and behavioral deficits. Now, different organs are more vulnerable during different phases. So you can see this chart, and at least this didn't mess up. But notice that the brain is affected the whole pregnancy. And, you know, the heart and the lungs and the ears, but the brain. So anytime during that whole pregnancy, you're going to have some effects on the brain. What about breastfeeding? Well, you know, having an occasional alcoholic drink hasn't shown to be harmful. However, it's ideally to avoid breastfeeding 2 hours after drinking an alcoholic beverage. So you want to limit it to 1 a day at the most, but you know what's the safest option? Not drinking at all. So again, what does drinking cause to the baby? Well, the alcohol intake goes down into the placenta, goes into that baby, and that baby's drinking too. You know, prenatal alcohol exposure, it causes lifelong effects. So basically the rule is there's no safe amount, there's no safe kind, and there's no safe time. So what are fetal alcohol spectrum disorders? They're a group of conditions. It's not a diagnosis, but it's a group of conditions. It describes that whole range of effects that occur in an individual that has been exposed to prenatal alcohol. You know, it might result in a number of physical, neurological, behavioral learning problems that range in severity. So you could have some children as they get older have more behavioral problems, have some more learning problems, but alcohol creates more long-term problems than any other substance. And this is why you don't want to take the chance, because it's 100% preventable 100% and 0% curable, and it lasts a lifetime. So when people say, oh well, so big deal, they'll grow out of it, no, they won't, because it lasts a lifetime. I am dealing with a 29-year-old and a 30-year-old, and I might as well be dealing with a 16 and 17-year-old, because that's where the brain is sometimes. They need an external brain to help, do some other skills. So it does last a lifetime. And that's the scariest thing, is that there's no cure, but we can 100% prevent it. So what's the prevalence? You go, oh, well, there's autism and there's all these other things. But look at this big line. This is fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. The whole range. This is autism. See the comparison? Really, there's many more children born that have prenatal alcohol exposure than have autism. This is the actual fetal alcohol syndrome. And we'll define that in a minute. But this is neonatal substance syndrome. Absent. Down syndrome, spina bifida, cerebral palsy. This is the rate of occurrence in 1,000 births. So let's look at this. It's much more prevalent than other birth defects. Now, remember I said there was a comparison there between FASD, spectrum disorders, versus FAS, syndrome. But the majority of children who have learning, behavioral, and functional disabilities as a result of prenatal exposure have an invisible disability. So they can walk the streets, they can go into school, they can go into a supermarket, and you don't know that anything's wrong. They don't have any facial features. They don't have a low IQ. Only 25% of those affected have an IQ below 70. Now, so that means it's just this FAS, the fetal alcohol syndrome, is just the tip of the iceberg. All these other partial alcohol-related neurodevelopmental disorder and birth defects and neurodevelopmental disorders associated with prenatal alcohol exposure are, we can't see them. And 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we'll look at those. So there's fetal alcohol syndrome. Again, so now we're getting into the, we've talked about all the ways to prevent this and what we need to do, but let's look at what, really happens. This is the most severe, and there's neurobehavioral impairments. There's also facial features. There's growth delay, and there's also structural brain damage. There's differences. If it's only partial, then there's those neurobehavioral impairment, and there's facial features. But if we don't know about exposure, you either have to have growth or structural. Because again, a lot of women don't admit to drinking, so we don't always know about the prenatal alcohol exposure. And then an alcohol-related neurodevelopmental disorder is that there is a confirmed prenatal alcohol exposure. And what does that mean? How can you confirm it? Well, here's FAS. First of all, there's this misconception that all children with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders have facial features. Well, they don't. And what are they? They have this short eye part here. They have a very smooth part above their lip, and they have a thin upper lip. So with fetal alcohol syndrome, have facial, physical, and CNS characteristics. Now, those features are most prominent 8 months to 8 years of age. So if my baby looks healthy, how do I know there are any effects? You're like, oh, I drank alcohol and my baby's fine. Well, let's talk about this. There's also neurodevelopmental disorder associated with prenatal alcohol exposure. There's 3 areas of deficit. There's the neurocognitive. There's problems with thinking, memory, learning. There's problems with behavior, sensory, attention. And there's problems with adaptive functioning, daily living, communication. Now, there's usually an onset before age 18. Didn't get quite enough coffee, I guess. And there's also this history of prenatal alcohol exposure. So what does that mean? Well, a neurodevelopmental, basically, I'm just, this is just irritating me. But basically, you have to have one or more of the following. And to have a confirmed prenatal alcohol exposure, it means 6 or more drinks per week for 2 or more weeks. So one week I had 6 drinks, I skipped a week, the next week I had, so there's at least a pattern that there's 2, for 2 or more weeks, and there's 6 more drinks. And the other one is that there's 3 or more drinks per occasion on 2 or more occasions. So that means 2 episodes of binge drinking. And we're talking 3 drinks on that binge. So if you're, every Friday you go out to a party and you have 3 drinks, and the next Friday you have 3 drinks, that's those 2 occasions. Also, if there's alcohol-related legal problems, evidence of alcohol use during pregnancy, like either blood, breath, or urine test, documentation during pregnancy there are biomarkers, and increased risk of drinking pregnancy determined by the use of a screening tool. All right. So let's think about what this neurobehavioral disorder is. Okay, so we know there's a physical condition because alcohol kills the cells, its structure, and the function of the brain. All right. Then the behaviors are the symptoms, not the disorder. They're actually not the disorder. So if this little boy was throwing chairs and stuff, that's not the disorder. That's a symptom of the brain damage. So let's think about, it's fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. It's an invisible physical disability. Now, with behavioral symptoms. Now, Diane Melvin has a neurobehavioral model at facets.org, and so there's much more information. But think about that. A woman just wrote a book, of life with her daughter, and you think about it, well, again, your mom's helping you, your dad's helping you. When you're going to grow out of it? Well, how old are you? Well, I see you're wearing glasses. Are you going to grow out of them next year? So because it's an invisible physical disability, it's really difficult for people to wrap their heads around it. There's a lot of red flags in young children. Vision, hearing problems, irritability, slow to toilet train, sleeping problems, lack of awareness of others, lack of awareness of space, auditory processing, sensory processing, inappropriate temper tantrums. And again, you'll get a PDF of this. All right, red flags. Again, remember we talked about thinking, memory, learning. So let's talk about, what does that mean? Well, there's poor reasoning, learning disabilities in school, there's difficulty with mathematical concepts, time, organization. Elena, why didn't you turn in your sheet, your reading sheet? Oh, I forgot. They turn in their reading sheets every Friday, right? Difficulty linking cause and effect. Why does he keep doing that over and over? Because he doesn't get the connection between, oh, if I do this, this will be the effect. Now, most of the time we realize that if we keep doing something over and over again, we're not going to have different results. But with those who have been prenatally exposed to alcohol, they can do the same thing over and over again. And they really, it's a brand new thing every time. They can hold information in memory and then perform some other kind of task, working memory. So don't give me 4 things to do and expect me to remember those 4 things while I'm doing one. Let me do one and then tell me. In fact, my granddaughter, who is 7, will tell me that now. I'm doing this right now, sort of let me do this. They're very literal and concrete thinkers, so they have difficulty with associations, and at a young age, and different comments that people make. Sarcasm. They have problems with self-regulation, so that's the behavior issues. Sensory issues and attention. Well, they have problems shifting attention from one thing to another. So you have to get their attention and get them to shift. It's especially hard to do that when they're on technology. But the sensory issues with touch and sound, my granddaughter, it's like she'll put on 4 shirts and it's like none of them feel exactly right. This is itchy, this is too tight, this is too loose, this hits me around the way. So I've just learned to do that. My son growing up used to always turn his shirts inside out and backwards and then chew on the labels. They really have poor judgment and impulse control, slow processing rate. So they're the kind of child that you ask them something and then you can go off and do something and come back and see what their answer is. There's also red flags for adaptive functioning, daily living, communication, speech, language delays, difficulty understanding directions. They can talk like they understand you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it went into their brain. They're definitely easily manipulated by their peers. Again, their verbal communication is much higher than their receptive language. So even though they sound like they're talking the talk, they can't always walk the walk, as Dan Dubosky would say. There's definitely a big gap between their strengths and weaknesses. They can't follow schedules. Those are all red flags. So, but we need to reframe our thinking from won't to can't. It's not that they won't do it. They can't. They're not the problem. They have a problem. We wouldn't expect the same behavior from a 4-year-old as an 8-year-old. Actually, we can think about this change in fonts by the fact that you have to pay extra attention because you never know how the font is going to look. It was really on purpose. No. So would we expect the same behavior? So look at the child who's age 6 and their strengths, they might be art and sports and their expressive language, but their other things, their receptive language is more like a 4-year-old or a 2-year-old. Again, somebody who's 18 might have very strong strengths and be way above 24. Their expressive language might be like a 20-year-old, but let me tell you, their comprehension is way down and their developmental age is more like a 10-year-old, which is why I said I have a 29 and 30-year-old and, I feel like I'm still dealing with teenagers. There's a lot of secondary issues, mental health issues because they have a lot of defenses, again, or it just could be due to the brain damage. There's anxiety, depression, there's lots of anger, frustration, fear, and also there's anger and frustration because they're not like everybody else. Unfortunately, they have multiple diagnoses because, again, it's the behavior. It's just the behavior is the symptom. It's not the cause. And so they get labeled with a lot of other things. Children with a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, with an you know, they can have trouble with the law starting at the average age is 12.8. They gravitate towards other deviant individuals. See, I never know too. This is a surprise. Like, oh, what's the next slide going to look like? So again, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder lasts a lifetime. One doesn't outgrow it, and that again is a big misconception of people. There's a lack of executive functioning. Again, they can't plan ahead, organize, problem solve. So you think about this. You think about going to the store and running errands and how you're going to map them out so that you can have the most direct route. Well, they don't think about that. They're going to go to this point and then come back here and then go there and then go there. And it's, you know, they can't plan ahead with that. They have still problems with memory and attention. Can't keep dates, like tell me when it happens, tell me it on that day. There's a lot of problems with homelessness, incarceration. They can also repeat the pattern of alcohol and pregnancy. And again, we talked about this, the mental health problems. There's also a shorter life expectancy. The average is 34. That's scary. As my kids get older, I worry. So what does the American Academy of Pediatrics say? No amount of alcohol is safe during pregnancy. You know, there's no safe time. All forms of alcohol pose a risk. Binge drinking poses a double dose. And if you're trying to conceive, stop drinking. Of all substances, alcohol produces the most serious neurobehavioral effects for the longest lasting too. That doesn't mean people should go out and use cocaine, heroin, and marijuana, but it has the most serious neurobehavioral effects. So why take the risk? No alcohol, no risk. If you want more information, the South Carolina Collaborative, let's see if it'll actually work. Looks like this. And there is information on prevention and diagnosis, intervention. There's a lot of links to some good resources, different organizations. There's a lot of videos, and I'm adding a lot more videos. Oh, that's not the one I wanted. There we go. So all of those are available. So please, Dan Dubofsky is a long-term trainer, has great stories about what happened with he and his son. And there's also videos of women and their experiences. But again, 9 months, no alcohol, I'm worth the wait. And I wish it was 10 months because, you know, the month before you're thinking about getting pregnant or, you know. If you need more information, my email, or if you have questions about this, drwisicusc@gmail.com. Again, there's the address for the Weebly. Just remember, there's no safe amount, no safe time, and no safe kind. These are the 4 people you can contact by phone, or you can call Axis One in Barnwell, which is where kind of we house the collaborative. But again, if you have questions about this, or you want more information, because again, this is not a live webinar, so I don't have a chat that I can answer questions. So if you have questions after viewing this, please email me and ask, and I will get you the information. I have lots of resources and research articles available on this and other people. Let's see, I think there's also resources at the end of this. Again, I'm going to have a 1-page handout that will attach to this presentation. that there is a toolkit, and there's screening and implementation guide for pediatric primary care providers. The CDC has a homepage. There's NoFast. There's the Circle of Hope. And I thought I added in the center in Canada has some really great information too. As I said, there's lots of efforts in Canada. There's lots of efforts in England, in Australia, and New Zealand, all about no alcohol during pregnancy. So this is a worldwide issue. And, you know, on the 9th, we celebrate FASD Day on the 9th of September, so at 9 a.m. And the idea is that bells would ring all around the world at 9 a.m. To say no alcohol for 9 months. So I thank you for watching this. I apologize again for the changes in font, but that was to see if you were awake. No. And you will be able to access a PDF version of this presentation with the correct font, and also links to the videos and other links, and a little bit of information. Thank you again for watching. Again, email me if you have any questions.